Hello students, welcome to the lecture on issues in HRD, and after the lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Explain the strategy for HRD, define diversity in workforce in HRD, describe exit strategy of HRD, define competitive advantage and relationship management, explain the human resource planning for diversification, define mergers, acquisitions and takeovers. Let's start with a brief introduction to issues in HRD. Human resources leaders encounter daily challenges in running the department functions. However, developing the HR strategic direction requires progressive, forward-thinking principles that also are aligned with the company's philosophy. Emerging issues such as globalization, workforce management, and legal compliance challenge HR departments. Employee retention has always been a concern that challenges HR leaders, keeping talented employees satisfied enough to stay with the company. Now let's discuss the strategy for HRD. The HRD strategy is a plan that defines how the human resources would be utilized through the use of an integrated array of training, organizational development, and career development efforts to achieve individual organizational objectives. At the macroscopic level, HRD requires a mix of strategies to achieve its objectives, because it is primarily a process, not a blueprint type of activity. Stakeholders' involvement is fundamental because the provision of health care is very dependent on highly trained professionals. The HRD policies and actions are politically very sensitive. They are linked to structural and organizational changes which cannot be achieved without the adaptation of the workforce to new roles and new exigencies. The formulation of policies which are not acceptable to providers or to educational institutions is a meaningless exercise, since these actors have the capacity to resist the implementation of policies which they resent. Stakeholders can be involved in the policy making through consultation, public hearings, briefs, committees, or even through a process of negotiation. Not all political cultures have a tradition of open consultation or of negotiation. Planning has lost much credibility through its misuse. Central planning has certainly been a failure in many respects. In market economies, strategic planning has been in fashion for many years but has fallen to disgrace when it became used as a recipe or as a formal exercise without a clear understanding of the underlying process. Coordination of policy making is or should be an integral part of the policy making process. One of the distinctive characteristics of human resources policies is that they are generated by multiple policy making agencies which have their own objectives and strategies. The use of the coercive power of the state by means of regulation and stimulation, use of incentives, is called for in a sector like health, where market mechanisms cannot ensure an optimal allocation of resources. The production and the diffusion of information can also be regarded as part of the set of HRD strategies. The adoption of strategies such as immediate practical implications for countries. Did you know? According to the Department of Labor, 70% of Americans hold jobs that were technically non-existent 20 years ago. Let's now move on and talk about the diversity in workforce in HRD. Generally speaking, the term workforce diversity refers to the policies and practices that seek to include people within a workforce who are considered to be in some way different from those in the prevailing constituency. As a social responsibility, because many of the beneficiaries of good diversity practices are from groups of people that are disadvantaged in our communities, there is certainly good reason to consider workforce diversity as an exercise in good corporate responsibility. By diversifying workforces, we can give individuals the break they need to earn a living and achieve their dreams. As an economic payback, many groups of people who have been excluded from workplaces are consequently reliant on tax-supported social service programs. Diversifying the workforce, particularly through initiatives like welfare to work, can effectively turn tax users into taxpayers. As a resource imperative, the changing demographics in the workforce that were heralded a decade ago are now upon us. Today's labor pool is dramatically different than in the past. No longer dominated by a homogeneous group of white males, available talent is now overwhelmingly represented by people from a vast array of backgrounds and life experiences. As a legal requirement, many companies are under legislative mandates to be non-discriminatory in their employment practices. Non-compliance with equal employment opportunity or affirmative action legislation can result in fines or loss of contracts with government agencies. In the context of such legislation, it makes good business sense to utilize a diverse workforce. As a marketing strategy, buying power, particularly in today's global economy, is represented by people from all walks of life, ethnicities, races, ages, abilities, genders, sexual orientations, etc. To ensure that their products and services are designed to appeal to this diverse customer base, smart companies are hiring people from those walks of life for their specialized insights and their knowledge. As a business communication strategy, all companies are seeing a growing diversity in the workforces around them, their vendors, partners, and customers. Companies that choose to retain homogeneous workforces will likely find themselves increasingly ineffective in their external interactions and communications. As a capacity building strategy, tumultuous change is the norm in the business climate of the 21st century. Companies that prosper have the capacity to effectively solve problems, rapidly adapt to new situations, readily identify new opportunities, and quickly capitalize on them. This capacity can be measured by the range of talent, the experience, knowledge, insight, and the imagination available to them in their workforces. Did you know that 70% of job seekers would prefer working for a medium or a small employer compared to a large company? We may need an exit strategy. We can plan our own exit strategy or ask company to help create an exit strategy. Sometimes an exit strategy is essential to cut losses or to remove ourselves from a mismatched work environment. An exit strategy is a way to remove ourselves from a current situation. Our goal is to remove without losing face or burning relationship bridges with, for example, our current employer. Sample exit strategies. Ways to quit job that will help us save face and move into a successful future include: search for a new job while we are still employed. Give notice when we accept a new job. Ask our employee if we can work part-time or a reduced schedule while we look for a new job. Transfer out of the current department if the company and the culture are a good fit, but our immediate environment is not. Exercise this exit strategy before relationship with our company is beyond repair. Ask our manager to discuss an exit strategy with us. No matter the reason, if our job is not working out, perhaps our organization will work with us to pave way out the door. No hard feelings, it just did not work out. Perhaps the company will work to create an exit strategy that buys out the contract or provides severance in return for termination of the employment relationship. We can also agree as an exit strategy on a reasonable time to exit our company. At the end of a project, on completion of a campaign, with the hire of a new employee, and when the company experiences the loss of a customer are examples of timed occasions to implement an exit strategy. Our company no longer needs skills, has determined that we are a poor fit, or has nothing available when a project is completed. If we can agree on an exit strategy, that again might involve a severance package. Whatever exit strategy we pursue, time our employment termination to occur before relationships are irreparably damaged. Now let's talk about the competitive advantage and relationship management. Fundamentally, a customer relationship management (CRM) solution provides the strategy and the implementation support that is needed to deliver the right products or the services, together with the necessary service levels to meet the expectations of the most profitable customers. A primary goal of a CRM solution is to develop a customer data repository where the various fragments of customer data can be collated and enhanced into a valuable business asset. CRM solutions assist business organizations to better understand and influence customer behavior and profitability. This insight enables firms to tailor products, provide consistent multi-channel access and service levels to meet the customer's needs. Customer relationship management lays the foundation for business organizations to understand better customer needs, build valued, long-term relationships, manage the profitability at the customer level. Human resource planning for diversification. Effective planning of HR is essential to match the requirements of the job with the individual. Right resources at the right time to meet the future organizational needs, they are critical. Organizations must have accurate, rapid access to information about both supply of and the demand for HR. Getting the right people at the right time, at the right place, the HRP is both a process and a set of plans. A process by which management of an organization determines its future HR requirements. A plan to fulfill the future HR requirements from internal and external sources. The process of human resource planning. Organizations need to do human resource planning so they can meet business objectives and gain a competitive advantage over the competitors. Human resource planning compares the present state of the organization with its goal for the future. Then it identifies what changes it must make in its human resources to meet those goals. Human resource planning for expansion. The globalization of business is occurring at an unprecedented rate. Focusing a business solely in Canada dramatically limits the size of the market for a Canadian firm. Wise Canadian business leaders are casting their eyes around the globe searching for growth, opportunities, and ways to diversify their markets. Connect with field experts in the US. It strongly recommends that the first step in any expansion is to seek the advice of the organizations that specialize in helping companies grow their business in the US throughout the US. Economic development organizations offer Canadian companies a range of expert advice free of charge. You should understand the HR, the similarities and the dissimilarities between Canada and the USA. It is important to establish policies, practices and administrative structures that focus on employees and comply with the federal and state labor laws. The US labor laws vary from state to state and are typically different than labor laws in Canada. Besides the differences in labor laws, US employees can be more litigious, and human rights and labor law violations in the US yield much higher damages. It is not all bad news though. Build a risk management program. Like Canada, workers' compensation coverage is mandatory for US employers, and it covers medical care and compensation for employees injured on the job. Also, workers' compensation insurance in the US varies from state to state, making administration and compliance a burden. A well-designed risk management program can reduce the risks, liabilities and costs associated with worksite safety. Consider co-employment models. Business today need help managing increasing complex HR issues. Often companies choose to outsource these functions through professional employer organizations (PEO) that provide a complete integrated suite of HR management services and turnkey solutions. Take a pooled approach to employee benefits. Employee benefits play an increasingly important role in the lives of employees and their families and can have a significant financial and administrative impact on a business. Payroll. As in Canada, the administrative function of paying employees and complying with the tax withholding and reporting requirements will need to be addressed. Depending on the level of complexity of the payroll activity, it may be prudent to outsource this activity to payroll service companies, HR outsourcing firms that also offer payroll administration, or accounting firms that specialize in this activity. Let's explore mergers, acquisitions and takeovers. Mergers. A merger is a combination of two companies into one larger company. Horizontal mergers take place where the two merging companies produce similar product in the same industry. Vertical mergers, they occur when two firms, each working at different stages in the production of the same good, combine. Congeneric merger or concentric mergers occur where two emerging firms are in the same general industry, but they have no mutual buyer or customer or supplier relationship. Conglomerate mergers take place when the two firms operate in different industries. A unique type of merger called a reverse merger is used as a way of going public without the expense and time required by an IPO. Accretive mergers are those in which an acquiring company's earnings per share, that is EPS, increases. Dilutive mergers are the opposite of above, whereby a company's EPS decreases. Acquisitions. An acquisition, also known as a takeover, is the buying of one company, the target, by another. An acquisition may be friendly or hostile. The types of acquisitions. The buyer buys the shares and therefore takes control of the largest company being purchased. Ownership control of the company in turn conveys effective control over the assets of the company, but since the company is acquired intact as a going business, this form of transaction carries with it all of the liabilities accrued by that business over its past and all of the risks that company faces in its commercial environment. The buyer buys the assets of the target company. The cash the target receives from the sell-off is paid back to its shareholders by dividend or through liquidation. Acquisition. Motivations and effects. The dominant rationale used to explain M&A activity is that acquiring firms seek improved financial performance. The following motives are considered to improve financial performance. Synergy. This refers to the fact that the combined company can often reduce its fixed cost by removing duplicate departments or operations, lowering the cost of the company relative to the same revenue stream, thus increasing the profit margins. Increased revenue or the market share. This assumes that the buyer will be absorbing a major competitor and thus increase its market power by capturing increased market share to set prices. Cross-selling. For example, a bank buying a stockbroker could then sell its banking products to the stockbroker's customers, while the broker can sign up the bank's customers for brokerage accounts, or a manufacturer can acquire and sell complementary products. Economy of sale. For example, managerial economies such as the increased opportunity of managerial specialization. Another example is purchasing economies due to increased order size and associated bulk buying discounts. Taxation. A profitable company can buy a loss maker to use the target's loss as the advantage by reducing their tax liability. Geographical or other diversification. This is designed to smooth the earnings results of a company, which over the long term smoothens the stock price of a company, giving conservative investors more confidence in investing in the company. Resource transfer. Resources are unevenly distributed across firms, and the interaction of target and acquiring firm resources can create value through either overcoming information asymmetry or by combining scarce resources.
This video segment discusses mergers and acquisitions in the context of strategic management. Merger and acquisition activity is extremely important in strategic management as we continue to see larger and larger deals in front of us. One of the more recent in the acquisition area is that of Google's proposed acquisition of the Motorola cell phone business for $12.5 billion. This signals Google's desire to further diversify away from its search engine business into an area it thinks has great potential for profits. It's instructive to differentiate between merger and acquisitions because they are quite different. In a merger, what you'll have is two firms of somewhat similar size that just combine their assets, and their names typically become combined as well. You may recall the failed merger some dozen years ago between Daimler and Chrysler. Their names became merged. Acquisitions are quite different. This is a situation where you find a larger or more cash-rich firm buying a smaller organization. The smaller organization then comes the subsidiary of the larger organization. If the Motorola acquisition goes through, Motorola will become a subsidiary of Google. In the not too distant past, Kraft paid $20 billion to purchase Cadbury. Kraft is a United States convenience food manufacturer, and Cadbury is a confectioner into chocolates and chewing gum, and they are located in the United Kingdom. Kraft paid almost $20 billion to purchase all the assets of Cadbury. In the business press, we quite often see merger and acquisition activity discussed interchangeably, but these terms mean something very different, as you can see from this and from this slide as well. In the situation of mergers, you have a situation where either the names become combined or one of the parents may become the dominant player, and they're simply named after the larger or the more dominant organization which comes through in a merger. One of the parents, regardless of how their name changes or does not change, usually emerges as the dominant management team. I don't know what the case in Sirius XM radio is, but I do know that Daimler, a German company, became the dominant management team of Daimler Chrysler some years ago. In acquisitions, you have a situation where the acquirer, which was Kraft Foods in this case of Cadbury, just buys out all the firm's stock. So they bought all of Cadbury stock for nearly $20 billion. And these types of activities can be either friendly or hostile for the acquiree. There are several types of merger and acquisition activity, and I'm going to detail 5. Vertical activity in mergers and acquisitions could be simply to buy a supplier or customer. So they're vertically going forward or backward to streamline their cost structure. And Johnson & Johnson acquired some time ago Mentor, which is a latex glove company, among other things, to complement its products to become a supplier to other divisions of Johnson & Johnson, hence streamlining its cost structure. In the case of horizontal merger and acquisition activity, we see a situation where you merge or acquire a competitor, and we've seen that in the recent past in so much as that the Dutch firm InBev bought out Anheuser-Busch, thus reducing their competition. to some extent. Product extension is a situation where you're buying complementary products or acquiring them to fit your portfolio, and in this case Kraft's acquisition of Cadbury is a perfect example of complementary products. It also exemplifies market extension, which is where you want to go into different markets. If you studied the Cadbury Kraft acquisition, probably the main reason that Kraft wanted Cadbury so badly is that Cadbury does very, very well in some emerging markets where Kraft does not do very well. And namely, those two markets are India and Brazil. Cadbury does very, very well there. Kraft has had minimal success and hopes to piggyback off Cadbury's leverage in those two large emerging economies for Kraft to do well. And that's market extension. And then there's also this unrelated firm of merger and acquisition activity. We call it conglomerate merger and acquisition activity. And this is a constant strategy that General Electric undergoes. General Electric, if you look at their web page or their annual report, they are into a wide host of products, from light bulbs to appliances to jet engines to medical imaging products in the healthcare industry, and many more industries as well. So it buys firms that are quite different, but at the same time it diversifies their total risk by being involved in a lot of different industries. The logic behind this related merger and acquisition activity, when you buy something that's related or you merge two firms that are related, what you hope is that you have value creation, and that is what's hoped from the merger between Sirius and XM. They need to create value because both firms were losing money, and we examine this when talking about the value chain. Part of that value creation is going to come from cost reductions, hopefully through economies of scale, or a larger new satellite radio organization being the new merged company. And also another value creating activity we see called economies of scope, and that is situations where firms can share competencies, and really this goes back to the value chain as well. They can share branding, name, content, subscribers, etc. There are some implementation issues in mergers and acquisition activity, no better illustrated than in the case of Daimler and Chrysler. And that's in cultural differences. A German organization merging with a US organization. Merger and acquisition activity always requires the merging of two different cultures, whether they be from two different countries or from the same country. You're still going to have two different and often quite disparate organizational cultures. That was a big problem for Daimler and Chrysler. Cultural merging involves a number of things. Among other things, it involves the combination of elements of two different cultures, management styles, products, customers, etc. It's interesting to see what's going to happen if the Google acquisition of Motorola happens and the Kraft acquisition of Cadbury, as of this speaking of late 2011, is already complete, and we still have not seen yet the full effect of the combination of both cultures. We do know in the case of Kraft that Cadbury has fought this over in the United Kingdom because they're not happy about an American company buying out their company, and many are unsure about their stability as an organization going forward, thinking Kraft might take the chocolate company and move it back to the United States. So it's difficult, costly, and it's not always possible to pull off a merger and acquisition from the implementation side. One last thing I'll say is that merger and acquisition activity is kind of risky, but it's especially risky in the international side. Research shows that 70% of all mergers or acquisitions that take place between firms from different countries are going to fail. So if you think about that, your odds of making a merger or acquisition work when you have headquarters from two separate countries, your odds are not very good.
Vertical integration. Vertical integration occurs when an upstream and downstream firm merges or one acquires the other. There are several reasons for this to occur. Takeovers. Takeover is a strategy of acquiring control over the management of another company, either directly by acquiring shares carrying voting rights or by participating in the management. Takeovers may be broadly classified as a friendly takeover. It is a takeover effected with the consent of the taken over company. It is also known as a negotiated takeover. Hostile takeover is when an acquirer company does not offer the target company the proposal to acquire its undertaking, but silently and unilaterally pursues efforts to gain control against the wishes of the existing management. Bailout takeover. Takeover of a financially weak or a sick company by a profit-earning company to bail out the former is known as a bailout takeover. Now, in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this chapter. HRD strategy is a plan that defines how the human resources would be utilized through the use of an integrated array of training, organizational, development and career development efforts to achieve the individual organizational objectives. The term workforce diversity, it refers to the policies and the practices that seek to include people within the workforce who are considered to be in some way different from those in the prevailing constituency. Sometimes an exit strategy is essential to cut losses or to remove ourselves from a mismatched work environment. A primary goal of a CRM solution is to develop a customer data repository where the various fragments of customer data can be collected and enhanced into a valuable business asset. Diversification or expansion, employee promotion or changes in the human resource necessities, effective HRP. Acquisition is reverse merger, a deal that enables a private company to get publicly listed in a short time period.